So, do you need to start your own magical apothecary? And if you do, what do you need to get started cheaply? That's what we're talking about today. Now, do I think everybody needs their own magical apothecary? No. Do I enjoy having mine? Yes, I do. However, I've invested a lot of money in it and I've learned through trial and error what works and what doesn't. So I do want to talk about when it's advantageous to start one, and if you do, kind of what you need, what the basics are, and how you can do it a little without spending as much money up front, because you don't want to go spend hundreds or even thousands of dollars starting your apothecary and then find out that you don't actually need one. For most of your magical uses, a lot of your kitchen herbs are going to get you pretty far. If you do any cooking at all, you have what you need for most basic spells. Rice, basil, rosemary, star anise, clove, even peppermint leaves, things like that. If you bake, you may even have flavors that you can substitute for oils if you're doing wet spells. So you probably have a lot of things you need. And in fact, you've heard a lot about bay leaf spells, and yeah, you probably have bay leaves in your kitchen. And shockingly, cinnamon is one of the biggest powerhouses in magical practice, as well as salt and ground instant coffee, one of my favorites. Ah, so good. So if you have most of that in your pantry already, you're fine. You don't necessarily need to start an apothecary, because if you're doing basic candle spells, basic spell jars, even basic oil creation, those herbs are going to get you a long way. And you will find recipes online for things that call for all these exotic herbs and spices. And I have to say, it's nice if you have them, but you don't always have to go buy hundreds of dollars of rare and expensive herbs, because A, there's substitutions for most of them, and B, the herbs you have already do a lot. But what you need to start with for sure, I'm just gonna list it again, is salt, basil, rosemary, cinnamon, and bay leaves. In addition to that, cardamom, cloves, and star anise are super helpful. But those are the basics. If you have those, you can do a lot. Now, if you want to go beyond the basics, that's when you might start building out your apothecary, because then you might get into witchier herbs that aren't part of a normal kitchen herb drawer. And that would be things like mugwort, or birch bark, or dried lemon peel, dried orange peel. You definitely want a lot of cinnamon sticks in addition to ground cinnamon. And it just depends on what your magical practice is. I don't do a lot of baneful magic, so I don't have to worry about all the different peppers and stuff, or graveyard dirt. But if you get into baneful magic, obviously there's some specialty ingredients that you specifically want for that. But for most of your work, basic kitchen ingredients will get you far. Now, if you get into different kind of spells, like ones that are more spiritual or even love spells, that's where you might want to start adding in things like rose petals and rose buds. I go through a lot of rose buds. And then if you don't cook a lot of non-American food, you might not even have cardamom pods on hand. By the way, I love how they smell. And I get into a lot of spells and oils that require things that are a little harder to get. This is lotus seed. And yeah, so I have a fully stocked apothecary for that reason. And then also, if you're doing larger quantities of things, that's where you might also want to get into an apothecary, meaning I go through a lot of cinnamon sticks and bay leaves and rosemary. So even though those are common ingredients, I go through way more of those in my magical workings than I do in my kitchen. So if I'm making a big jar of an oil like this, I'm using a ton of ingredients for it to make it super strong. So the quantities I need are more than I would have in my normal kitchen. And then at some point I stop wanting to have to restock my kitchen basil because I'm using so much basil, right? Or I'm using so many bay leaves for manifestation spells. And normally you just have the little jar of bay leaves and not the jumbo portion or industrial portion. And then on top of that, if you want to get into more exotic ingredients for this is a spiritual healing oil that I've got steeping right now. It has a lot of dried flowers and dried specialty herbs in it that you're not getting at H-E-B and stuff like that. And so that is also where I prefer to have a fully stocked apothecary. Because it is so annoying when you sit down to do a spell and you realize you don't have enough of something, or you don't have the ingredients, and they're not things you can run across the street and get. It's even worse than if you're baking a cake and you don't have eggs or whatever, because at least you can go get those across the street, even though those are horrifically expensive. So yes, that is where you start wanting an apothecary. If you need larger quantities, or if you know that you're going to be doing work that requires specialty ingredients. So how do you get started cheaply? First of all, the jars are actually one of your biggest upfront expenses, and especially if you're experimenting and you don't know what kind of jars you like. So when I first started out, I was like, oh, I want like a lot of aesthetic jars, and like, oh no, I want all my jars to look the same, and like, oh, I want them to look like, you know, the herb jars. But then again, with the quantities, I'm like, except I need larger quantities than these hold. And then I also really like aesthetic stuff. So I would buy like herb kits from like online witch stores, where you get like these tubes and they've got cute labels and they've got cute corks, but the quantities are kind of small. And so I have spent a lot of money on buying these kits from like witch shops, where you might get 20 different herbs. And then I'm like, even though I use a lot of different herbs, I still only use like 5 of the ones from that kit. And then those are empty, and then I don't use any of the other ones. And then also, as cute as these are, the cork isn't the most airtight, although I do have to say she does a great job of getting that cork in there, so this is one of the best places to buy from. So there's nothing wrong with buying these, by the way. I'm just trying to give you examples of things I've done where I'm like, through trial and error, I'm like, that was fine to know if I liked that, but if I'm gonna spend $200 on like a kit, I might spend it on a different kit, or spend that $200 a little bit differently. The other thing I learned is that not all labels are the same. I can tell you that, meaning I have bought those cute like craft labels, and they start lifting and peeling off of my jars, because jars are like rounded, and those don't have enough adhesive for how thick the craft label is. And so some labels, even if they're expensive, they function like they're cheap, and other ones aren't oil safe. And so you might have one that you think is good for using on like an oil jar, and then the oil is like making the adhesive weaken, or it's like staining and like making the label itself look yucky. So finding the right labels was a lot, and labels can be expensive too if you're buying like 10 different kinds, trying to figure out which ones you like and which ones work. So what I'm gonna go through now is like, what are the basic like supplies that you need if you decide to start your apothecary, and kind of how to get them on the cheap, or at least cheap-ish, right? Because if you're buying quantities of anything, it's obviously like less expensive overall to buy them in bulk. But this is why I'm like, make sure you know up front that this is something that you want to do, because it can add up, either if you're buying everything at once, or even if you drag it out and buy it over time. Don't do that with your containers. You can slowly add herbs over time, even if you bought a bunch of jars and they're sitting empty. That's better than buying 2 jars and then 2 jars, because they get stupid expensive. So the first thing I want to recommend is that you get something that seals really, really well, because some of your herbs you're just not going to go through as fast, and you don't want them like drying out or expiring. And so I like these jars with this screw top lid, and it's got like this little thing in here, so it does close pretty tightly. Like obviously it's not canning jar level, even though they're like labeled that. These keep super, super, super well. I like the size of these, but there are some herbs where the quantity you get of them doesn't make any sense for the larger jar, and so I have a set of the smaller jars as well. I cannot get this lotus seed in like bigger bulk quantities, which is fine because I don't go through it that often. And then things like rosebuds, where they're like larger, they go in this one. Now the one exception is, yes, I do have my cinnamon in this little jar, partially because I was experimenting with these jars when I was still trying to figure out what I liked, and it's fine for cinnamon. I don't feel like it's going to lose its potency because it's in a cork lid jar instead of screw top. And also sometimes I do cave into the aesthetic still, I have to admit it. So like for my basil, I did end up recently, you know, switching to a larger jar since I'm going through so much basil, and I did get a cork top and I was fine with it. I already had this jar, and I know I go through the basil quickly, so it's not going to dry out just because it's a cork lid again instead of screw top. So I'm not saying there's any hard and fast rules. I'm saying that like figure out what works for you, and I want to tell you what worked for me. And if I were starting out again, I would probably like completely invest in these black screw top ones of the 2 different sizes, and then only get a few of these like aesthetic like cork top apothecary jars. And then I don't know if I would buy these like little guys again unless they were something that was like a rare herb that was like super hard to get. I do have to say that when I was first starting out and I wasn't sure that I really wanted to invest, and again, I'd rather buy from small businesses, I did purchase a lot of like packets of herbs, not these like vials, from Emerald Lotus Mystic, and I really like that. She's got some good ones. They're like a good quantity for starting off, and then you can use her resealable pouches without getting jars if you want to. And then if you're at the point that you know you want to do this long term, then you can invest in jars and transfer them to jars. And that leads me to my second point, which is that I love aesthetic labels and I do not like making aesthetic labels. So one of the things that I did was I would buy these jars from Emerald Lotus Mystic, and then I would like peel the label off. Sorry, not the jars. I would buy the herbs from her shop, and then I would peel the label off and stick them on my jar and use that as my label for some of my things. And again, I don't necessarily I'm not the biggest stickler for consistency, which is probably shocking because I am a Virgo, but I kind of like the eclectic look of having different jars and having different labels. I don't necessarily like it to look all samey. And then it helps me to know, oh, I'm looking for my cardamom. It's in this jar. It's not in one of these. And it's like a different kind of herb or spice, so it stands out to me. So it makes sense in my head. So like I said, if you like everything to be consistent, then these are the two kinds of jars. Just get these and don't worry about anything else. If you like to be a little eclectic, mix it up with some of these different ones. And then I'll show you the labels that I really like, because I don't buy all my herbs from Emerald Lotus Mystic, especially since I'm buying them in bulk and I buy a bunch of stuff that she doesn't have. But like I said, when I was starting off, it was super fun to like just take her labels and peel them off. Or if I went to the witch shop, sometimes they had like labels I could peel off and restick. You may need to glue them, you know, if the adhesive doesn't like transfer super well. But I thought that was fun and kind of like kitschy and eclectic. And then I also tried these labels. I didn't love these. I don't know if you can see this, but I'll like hold it out and zoom in. These are fine, but they're just like a little small, so I couldn't necessarily write everything I wanted to on them, but they do stick pretty well. I'll put them in the Amazon storefront if you like them. And then I did get a couple different kinds of these craft labels, some on a roll and some on a sheet. I think this one's from the roll and it stays on better. It's like thinner. And then the ones from the sheet, I think that are thicker are the ones that are not sticking well to some of the ones in my Apothecary cabinet, which I'm inserting some B-roll in this video so you can see what that looks like. But my favorite labels and jar combo would be these black lid jars in the larger and the smaller sizes. And then for labels, 100% these chalk labels. And I know chalk was trendy for a while and then it went out of style, but functionally, I love these because yes, you can wipe them off and reuse them, but they don't smudge super easy. This is a little smudged, but I blame myself for that. So you can change them up if you need to, like if you end up not using a ton of stuff. And then the pack of these is not super expensive. I also just really like the aesthetic. And then the pin is great because this leads me to my second point, is that you can also write on the top on the black lid with the chalk marker. That is my favorite thing because then you've got the cute label if you're looking at it like this, but in my Apothecary cabinet, sometimes I'm looking top down, and so I need to be able to see what it is top down if I can't see it from the side, depending on what shelf it's on. So yes, it has been a lifesaver to be able to write on the lid and not have to use more labels, because you're probably like, Abby, you could just stick a label on the lid. Yeah, but I don't want to. I don't want to put a label on the side and put a label on the lid. So when I show you like the tour of the Apothecary cabinet, you'll see there are more types of labels in that cabinet than what I'm just showing you here. There's also more of these vials and more types of these vials, which I cannot emphasize enough. I just don't think you get the biggest bang for your buck. But if you're going to use small quantities of the herbs and you like this aesthetic and you have the money, then it's totally worth it to you. It's just not worth it to me because I use larger quantities, because I'm making big things of spell oils basically. Okay, so, and I would definitely not repurchase these again. Like these are cute, like this, you know, spice jar kind of thing. They're cute, but other than like pine needles, I don't even know if there's any herbs or spices I like having in this kind of a jar. And then I have in my apothecary cabinet, I do have other cork jars that you'll see as well. And I just wanted to say, when you see them, you might be like, Gabby, what's that? What's that? I don't recommend them. I do not recommend them for storage. And even these, where my cinnamon is in this kind, I would not use this for storage of anything else. Like even for cinnamon, like the cork lid is kind of loose. I can't get it in there super tight. And these jars are actually meant for like yogurts and puddings, like that you make at home, and they have like a plastic thing that goes over it. It's just not the best for like herb and spice storage, basically. Okay, so having gone through all that, I also have these kinds of things where I keep my salt in this. Where it's like just this lid that sets on, and it's got like a little scoopy spoon that comes in it. These are cute. They're ceramic. I don't know if this is from like Target. You can find tons of fun containers at like TJ Maxx, Home Goods, even like Target sometimes has super cute kitchen stuff. So again, if you like to have like a mix of like aesthetic and kooky different things, 100% shop the thrift shops, look at TJ Maxx, Home Goods, see what Target. I bought this on sale. It's actually a cute little wooden tray with like 2 of these and like a tall pourri spot thing that I should have brought out for this video but didn't. So yeah, you can find tons of adorable things, and just really think about like, I would keep salt and sugar in those, but not, you know, my actual herbs. Whew, okay, and then my other big thing is 100% look for glass and 100% look for glass and ceramic. Do not buy plastic. That is my other trial and error thing, and why I'm like giving you this like curated list on my Amazon storefront, because I did buy a bunch of accidentally plastic like resealable jars that I thought were like glass mason jars, but they were plastic, and it didn't say that clearly on the listing. So that's why I'm like, no, I'm gonna show you like what I recommend in my Amazon storefront. And like, I'm showing you a couple of the oils I make, but my taller cabinet is full of a bunch of different oils and moon water and like a bunch of stuff like that, and just glass. That's all I have to say. Yes, it's heavy. Yes, it's worth it. And then before you put your herbs and stuff in here, even though you're not using them for food, like I still prefer glass because I don't like plastic leaching. I still prefer washing them before use. And then because this is for magical purposes, I do smoke cleanse all of my containers. So I wash them and smoke cleanse them. Before I put anything in, make sure they're completely dry, because you do not want your ingredients rotting. They will completely like not be effective, and in fact be the opposite of effective, be harmful if you let them rot. So make sure that they're completely dry. And then that's also why I'm like, build slowly. Like even if you buy a bunch of glass jars and you like wash and use them over time, it was exhausting when I bought like a bunch of stuff in bulk and had to do like 30, 50 jars like in 2 days. Like, go slow, but get the jars at once, because again, it's more cost effective that way. Oh yes. And then the other thing I recommend is buying like weird mixed packs of things, not that come in the vials, because you're mostly paying for the labor and the glass when you get those, more so than the herbs. But I buy these bundles of dried flowers from Amazon. I know that sounds crazy, and these are listed under like candle making or soap making, and you'll get fresh lavender, which is nice. This is actually like freshly dried lavender. And then you'll get rose petals in there, and then lily. And then that is the other thing, is chrysanthemums. Use a lot of chrysanthemums, which has another name that I don't remember. Rosette. You'll sometimes get weird things that are hard to find, like the lotus seeds I get come from here. You'll also get more normal things like rosemary, but marigold flowers. And then this is albizia flowers. So when you buy these like mixed packs of flowers, you'll also get like, this is, oh my gosh, I think these are called like plum flowers or something. This has like the scientific name on it. But anyway, this is like super cost effective. I think it's like $25 for this box of like all this stuff. Jasmine, that's another one, dried jasmine flowers. And if you look, these labels are actually pretty cute. So if you do like the colorful labels, these are ones you can peel and then re-stick with some glue on your own jars. And again, rose petals, You may not go through as many rose petals as I do. Like, it's insane how much rose petals I go through. So I highly recommend getting one of these, and I do have this listed on my Amazon storefront under Apothecary. Oh, and then snow chrysanthemums, so like lots of different kinds. And then in addition to the box, I did buy dried lotus flowers separately, but that's like one of the only like dried flowers I've had to get separately outside of one of those kits. I also make candles, by the way, so I do like having the dried flowers for my oils and my candles and my spell jars. So the dried flowers come in super handy. And then the other thing I like to get online is bulk. I buy my bay leaves in bulk, I buy my cinnamon sticks in bulk, and I get like dried lemon slices in bulk. I put that in a lot of my oils and bath salts. I do make magical bath salts as well, so I go through a lot of that. Bee pollen is another really good ingredient, but dried orange peel and dried lemon peel, they smell great, they're great in oils, they look nice. And again, even if you're not making oils in bulk, I brought out like this oil where you can see there's like a little bit of like petals in it. I don't know if you can tell. So it still gives like a good aesthetic vibe without being as overwhelming as some of my other oils. And then you can't see, but there's herbs in all of my like small goddess oils too. Well, not all of them, sometimes I strain the herbs out. This one doesn't have herbs and this one does. And then, this is not an oil class, so I shouldn't go off on a tangent about oils, but you know I want to because I love my oils so much. Okay, so that is the basics of an apothecary. And then I do like the small vials for some things, by the way. So if you are using black salt and you make your own black salt, I use vials like this or the screw top kind to store ingredients that aren't just herbs and spices, like things that you might use in your magical practice, like your incense ash if you make your own black salt, as well as like if you have any like things that your familiars bring you, I keep those in jars. And so jars come in handy. So that's why I'm like, the jars are actually in some cases a bigger investment than the herbs themselves, because you will find as you go through your practice that you are wanting to stick more and more things in jars. So it's helpful to have lots and lots of jars. And then I think I mentioned rice. Rice is another big base ingredient you need to have on hand, which if you cook with rice, it's fine. And a lot of people save jars from other things and reuse them. And I do like to do that. I just find that not if it's plastic, and sometimes like the weird shapes and sizes of like one-off jars, like, or even like pickle jars and stuff where they're just not as cute, I might use those for something and like hide it in the back of my apothecary and not have like that up front where people see it. Okay, so this is Apothecary Basics. I hope this has answered questions about whether or not you need to start one, and if you do, how to get started and how to get started inexpensively. Buy bulk jars in 2 different sizes. Get the flower kit because you're gonna want the aesthetics. Like, everybody loves the aesthetics of witchcraft. And then slowly build up your herbs and spices and make sure that you're not buying pre-jarred things, because again, if you're buying stuff like this, which I love this lady, by the way, this is not a knock against her, it's just most of your money is going to her markup on the jars and her labor, which is totally fine. If you can afford it and you like these, do that. But you're just not, to me, it's just not the best bang for your buck. And I spent a lot of money building up my apothecary, and I don't want you to have to learn the hard way. And if you don't like the chalkboard labels, there's another kind I'll put on there, but just make sure you know what you're using your labels for, because most labels are fine for dry ingredients, except for the thicker craft ones, which don't go around the glass bottle and stick very well. But if you are using them for oils too, you're gonna wanna be careful. And I use these chalkboard labels on everything, on my herbs, spices, and on my big jars of oils as well. So, yeah. I hope you liked this video. If you did, drop me a comment. Tell me if you have any other questions about apothecary basics and if you want any more advanced information about apothecaries. But I think that's enough to get started. Okay, love you guys. Bye. I'm Gabby from Mystic Moon Rising. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye.